Hello, everyone. We are ready for the next segment of 24 authors in 12 hours. This is a marathon session with different authors throughout the day, and I have Yani M. Payne. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You did. Yes, thank you.
I, I was like, I should have asked you that backstage, but I didn't because I was just so excited to actually meet you. And it is YM on your book cover, In the Shadow of the King. This is super, super exciting. I'm going to be putting your link in, and you have a book two out now as well, correct?
Yeah, volume one and volume two are both available. It's a 4 volume series, but we would talk about it a little bit. But yeah.
And that's what we're going to do. So go ahead and let's talk about what inspired this book.
Oof. Well, I mean the it's kind of funny. I was working as an overnight security guard. I wrote it like 20 years ago. I was working as an overnight security guard, and I was several things bored. Um, I had played all the video games. I brought a little PlayStation with a flip up screen at the time. And I was bored. I played all the video games, watched all the movies, read tons and tons of books, read tons and tons of comics, and I was like, I'm gonna write my own. That's kind of like how I started, right? And then I was like, well, I'm not gonna write a book. I'm just gonna write a short story, like something quick, just to use up the time here. And I didn't really know what to write about, so I immediately thought about the things that were kind of irking me. And at the time, and nothing really has changed much, sadly, was various different geopolitical uh, things in turmoil, and a lot of stuff that was considered, conspiracy theories and fringe ideas. And I was like, well, let me just go play with them, just why not? And so I started writing. I got to the end of my 50 pages, and I was like, oh my god, there's so many unanswered questions. I guess I got to keep going. So I did. So it turns out that my 50-page short story was literally just the initial climax, or the initial inciting incident for the entire thing, and ended up with a pushing 1,400-page epic, um, when I really intended for 50 pages.
Yep. So in your world building, you build it within the United States. So luckily, you don't have to create new maps or anything like that. But you definitely have
It's
a vibe to it of it's not the America of today. So do you want to
it
describe
is
this a little bit?
very it is very much the America of today, except it's like 6 to 7 years from now, um, and it's all of the stuff that's happening right now, but the aftermath of the stuff that happens right now. So, um, given the things that are going on, I mean, it's meant. It was written way back when I wrote it, and it was 2004 when I wrote it. Way back when I wrote it, it was written kind of as a, it was my own like personal sort of protest, if you want to call it that. And now it's even more so. And it's a warning also. The idea is to get people to engage in a story world that is so close to the real world, but rides just on the edge of fiction and reality. It's there. It's our world. It's what we live in. And if we don't, at the very least, acknowledge, and I'm not going to say wake up or any of the stuff like that, because it's not what it is. It's not waking up. We're already, most people are already awake to it. Most people already see the things that are going on. It's happening every single day. And so when we explore that with these characters that have created in this world, nothing happens alone, right? So we don't have just one main character. It's an ensemble cast of main characters on both sides, the villains and the heroes. And the heroes are more like anti-heroes than they are heroes. And then you have the political parties that are doing what they do, to manage the stuff and move it on beyond the stage where it's at. So at the point in volume one, the world is a totally different place. We've got everything has happened up to that point where you have so many people being arrested for literally nothing. So many people being arrested. Prison camps are going up all over the place. They're just, people are being disappeared. So they're given the option to either go into what I call the American conscript troops or American conscript army. If you go into or American conscripted service. So if you go to the American Conscripted Service, then if you survive for 2 years, then you come back and you be free. If you don't survive, well, that sucks. Sorry for you. And the other option is to go into an undisclosed location, detention facility, for an undetermined amount of time. There's no end to it. It's just however long they decide to keep you there, and that could be for something as simple as like jaywalking, or DUI, or you looked at somebody the wrong way, whatever it is. And it kind of, obviously, that kind of thing is going to get out of hand. But what happens is there's kind of a slow boil, right? Like the frog, the proverbial frog in the boiling water. As the slow boil, the heat comes up, it really kind of just starts to become normal. And so people see the vans and the trucks on the streets, and the military police, because the military are now on the streets in the U.S. Black bagging people. By that I mean putting a black bag over their head and popping them into a van, zipping them off. That's the world just as the book is starting, right? So that's the end of that era. Now it's a kind of cleanup moment, but really the bigger problem is the U.S. has been thrown out of the world stage. So you've got the U.S. in a complete economic decline, totally removed from the UN, booted out, and a new global government called Government One that has formed. I wouldn't say taken over; it just kind of formed in the absence of U.S. Involvement. And the only ally for China, or for the U.S., interestingly enough, is China, because they're the only ones who opted not to join Government One. So this story follows a group of anti-hero characters called the Shadows, and the Shadows are ancient, but we don't really get that feeling right away. You get to learn their background, their lore, more in Volume 2, a little bit in Volume 1, but more in Volume 2. Volume 1 is pretty much just a straight drive right to the destruction of the World Court, which happens right at the very beginning in the prologue, and then circles back around so that it happens at the end to see all the build up to it. Yeah.
No, it's a lot of world building in there, and I love that it takes multiple volumes. I'm going to share your Instagram real quick, just so people know how to reach you. I did put the links for both books into the chat. Let's talk a little bit about. So you wrote this book. Writing a book, a lot of times for an author, is like this huge accomplishment. As indie authors, though, like we have to go through the whole editing process, the publishing process, the marketing process. What have you really learned from this journey?
That marketing is probably the single most important thing. Editing, obviously, I'm going to put all the book stuff. That's the first part. Create your story, get it perfected, make sure that it's solid 100%. Because one of the things that I did is I released a volume. The version that's behind me here is not. It is the same book, but it wasn't really completely properly edited. So the new one looks like this, has this cover on it, and having it fully edited properly, not just for typos, but for content, right? Because when I re-released Volume 1 in 2022, it was when I had gotten a first look deal with Warner Brothers for the prequel spinoff TV series called An Accidental Fire. We're still in development on that. We had big stall in there. What a different story. And the kind of the push, and it was entirely my fault. The push there was to use the production of An Accidental Fire to establish kind of like, hey, there's a book out here. There's an IP that exists. This is coming for. And I made the mistake of not giving my editor enough time to really kind of hone in on the stuff. And I was like, all right, we got to go. We got to get this out by August because we have to make delivery of the trailer in November, and we got a bunch of stuff to do. So we did. It did great at first, and then stuff happened with the WB and the Discovery merger and all that, and so our production kind of halted. When that happened, I told the team that was the helping us to move it forward to just wait. I was like, wait, I don't want to damage influencers and whatever. And I was like, I don't want to damage your brand because you're talking about something that's not coming out. So, let's just put the nix on it for the moment. And when we get things going again, then we'll, circle back around. And in that time, I hadn't discovered the TikTok book talk thing. And holy macaroni, that's a whole different world for book marketing and for authors to connect with each other and for readers to connect with the authors that they want to follow and indie authors and so on. It's really awesome. And that's been the biggest turning point for me and biggest learning. I don't want to say learning curve, but it kind of is. It's a super learning curve, really, really sharp one. But it's very cool. And it's a really, really different way. It's not as challenging for me as Facebook. I don't really do the Facebook thing. So for me, Facebook is like a weird space. And Instagram feels like it's so much visual picture stuff. And I don't know how many people actually read the captions. So when you're a writer and you put the caption's really long, you know that nobody's reading it. So what? But that was, I think the editing / marketing has been, I think they're on equal level of importance.
I think it's such an important point for for indie authors, especially, is the marketing. People can't read your book if they don't know it exists.
Right. Yeah. And there's been quite a few, right, that have marketed very well, but they put out a product that is, let's call it, less than professional. And there are a few that are, I don't know if they're trending or whatever, but there's big, kind of a to do right now in the book talk world about these authors who marketed very well, and they just have a product that people are like, what in the world is this? Like, why did I pre-order? Why did I read this? And that's rough. Like, that's gotta be rough for the author, but at the same time, that's gotta be rough for your readers, because the readers are expecting something, and then it's almost like false advertising, and it feels like you've been tricked, and that's not, it doesn't treat the readers with respect, I don't think.
Yeah, and I think you lose readers if it's something they don't expect. And it's interesting. I do a lot of book reviews as well as writing, and one of the things I found is just sometimes a book can be super, super famous and popular, and for whatever reason, it doesn't resonate with you. And I'm going to bring up one because I think they're so popular and famous, they're not going to care that I don't like them. But I cannot read Fourth Wing. I've tried to read Fourth Wing like 3 times. I cannot get past like chapter 1. One time I managed, I was like, okay, I've read chapter 1. I'm going to skip ahead. I'm just like, I can't get this book. Like, it makes no sense to me. The initial premise for me, I'm like, so your mother is terrible. Your sister tried to save you. She raised you in a way that you shouldn't have been raised. And now you're going to die for no apparent reason, even though like you're a bunch of like little college kids. And there's no explanation to why any of this is happening. And I'm just like, I just can't, and I'm looking for the why, like I'm looking for like, if you read Dragon Riders or Pern, there's an offshoot of that with Anne McCaffrey, where this kid happens to be near the hatching grounds and a dragon imprints. And you're like, well, oops, that was a mistake, right? And you're like, okay, I kind of get why this weak kid suddenly has a dragon, a talking dragon in your head, because, oops, wrong place, wrong time. Oh, but you got a dragon, so you win. That made sense, right? Or you get the Hunger Games, it's all about killing people off because this is like for entertainment. But it's kind of like the Hunger Games meets the dragon story, but I don't know why. And it never, if it's explained in book 2 or 3, it's too far along for me to keep caring about why is this happening. So that's just an example to me of like what you're describing, of these books that don't work. But let's talk more about your book. And so you've got two books out now. You're coming out with some more. What characters have you developed that have just kind of taken on their own personality, where you're like, I did not know this was where this character was going to go?
It's a really interesting way that you phrase the question, because all of them, right? I don't have in my mind, the way that I write, I don't do the outlines and the story creation and all that stuff. I have an idea. I know a certain point in time. It's kind of like Doctor Who, right? There are fixed points in time. You can't mess with those. But what happens to get there how do you get there? What happens to the characters along the way? They're you don't know. And so I just listen to my characters. Um, they tell me their story, and I just put it on the paper. Um, and they always surprise me all the way through. Even now, as I'm going back through in these updates for Volume 3 and Volume 4, and now the Volume 1 and 2 updates that I've completed and republished, they're the characters aren't changing, right? But they're getting deeper, more involved, and their thoughts are there, and their thoughts that I guess I knew before, but I wasn't very mature in 2002. I was 22 years old. I was kind of a hothead, and man, I was you know fresh out of the military. Or 24, sorry, 2004. It's 24. So fresh out of the military, had a shoulder injury, so I got a medical discharge. Fine, whatever. But I was like, I'm gonna get in there. But I had a 24-year-old brain that was just writing because I was bored and frustrated. And now here I am, 45, and my voice is different. I've learned a lot more. I've seen things through many different perspectives. I've had a kid, so I see things from the character who's a father in the book. Well, there are a couple, but their perspectives, I think, are now much richer because I have my perspectives as a dad, but then also my son's friends' dads. So, I can take all those things into account, put them in, and also the various different things that I've learned through people, from people throughout the course of the 21 years since I wrote it.
No, I think that's really great, and thank you for your service. And the speaker before you, Doug Burby, also Army veteran, and then just want to give a shout out to WD Kilpack. And the reason I'm doing this is because if you watch this show and you're like, I like these books by Yani, these are probably some other books that you're gonna like by. And so even though like this all kind of focuses on post-apocalyptic dystopian kind of thing, certain themes kind of flow better because just because it's dystopian fiction does not make it the same kind of dystopian fiction.
Right.
One of the authors earlier did Grid Down, and you're like, oh my gosh, like how do you survive with like no electricity? And so there's very different kinds of dystopian fiction. And so
Yeah.
I think that you bring a great case too about not just do you evolve, but your characters evolve, right? Like you want to make sure that as you're doing the hero's journey or these classic tropes, that you are bringing in where it's realistic. Because it's like you read a book as a reader, and then you're like, well, that was not realistic. How did they just go from acting like a 22-year-old kid to like a 45-year-old person? Like, what was that growth piece in between that the average person has to take to get to that point?
Right. And it's really interesting. There's a couple things we were talking about before with various different stories and things that happen as you're writing and so on. And it's one of the things that has always bugged me, even in the original version and the new final versions. One of the things that always bugged me in general was unanswered questions. There are things that happen in stories. It happens all the time, and I don't think sometimes it's intentional. Sometimes it was just like extra stuff that was put in there, and it doesn't always not need to be there, and it doesn't always need to be answered. Sometimes it's so minimal that it makes no difference whatsoever. It's answered. But in my story, the timelines within each volume are so tight and so dense that if there is something that happens, it needs to be answered, because if it's not answered, then you're gonna be like, wait a minute, that was like a week-long book, and like that thing is still lingering out there. What, how do we get to that? How do we answer that? And I think it's really important, not just for the story, for the characters, that the characters aren't asking the questions. Hey, what happened to that thing? Because they're the ones who are going to be asking. Right. And if the characters ask a question, then the audience is more than likely going to ask a question. And if the characters are, I'm going to pick on Jurassic World right now. If the characters are like like some of the characters in the new Jurassic World, and they just don't ask the question about how something happened, I mean, maybe they're blithering idiots. I don't know. Or, you're supposed to assume as an audience that they're so wrapped up in the chaos that they didn't ask the question. All the people in that story are super highly trained, crazy experienced mercenaries who've been through this and that and whatever, and they're just not thinking of these questions. in their quiet moments. I'm not talking about when they're running, like they're just like, in a spot where they can stop and ask.
Yeah.
They don't ask, and you're like, well, I don't know. So if you got a book where you have more time, answer the question. Like, answer the question, because if you don't, and the character doesn't ask it, the audience is going to, and then you have a problem. So just
or make sure there's a reason. Like in my current book, Decoding History, I leave it very vague on both the maternal and paternal side of the family of this woman. And I want the reader to constantly be asking, like, is this really this person's father? Is that the correct answer? Or are they just lying to us? Because I want the reader to ask that the whole time. Because I want there to be some ability to maneuver, right? But I want the reader to say, well, that was resolved in a minute that didn't feel satisfying. And so I think that there's I did an article a few weeks ago about the whole point of like thin plots and things like that, where you want the reader to ask so that then there's room to maneuver. But then there's also, like you said, this point of like, dude, if your readers are not asking the question, if your characters are not asking these questions, if they're not pulling through this, you need to like really, really consider why. And then to me, like you brought up such a good point on timelines. Like when stuff just doesn't make sense. You're like, what? This woman had a child when she was 14. Like this should be a very clear plot point, or you should. Like, was there some kind of timeline thing, like where there was an accelerator and now they're the same age? Because I do love when people play with timelines where suddenly the grandmother is like younger than the grandson because they went through, a space-time continuum. You were talking about Doctor Who, right? Like that's always fun.
Yeah.
You've got to explain this in the story.
And like, so sometimes it's really simple though. Like you can answer a question with a single sentence, and it doesn't have to be like overwhelming where you spend tons of time. Just a single thing somebody can say to another, or an item has been found that was left. Fine, like, and it's quick, and it's usually, and if it's subtle is great, right? Especially for things that are not super important, but people can have a question. Just drop a subtle answer somewhere, and it's done. Like you're solid. But it's,
I do want to say that we're halfway through the day on 24 authors in 12 hours. And I want to put in here for anybody interested, we have some amazing authors still on the way. And so if you like the show, if you want to donate, we do have a way to donate. We also have merch. So if you want a coffee cup, if you want a water bottle, anything like that. Somebody mentioned earlier we should get wine glasses. So I might add that into what we're doing. And then I'm going to do a shameless plug for my own book. I did mention I'm an author as well. And right now, one of my favorite things I've been writing about is dystopian fiction. This book just came out a few weeks ago. So I'm doing some midlife fantasy, but decoding history, like I said, dystopia at different levels is also the speculative fiction based on 2025, based on data being erased. And it really kind of looks at that concept of the archivist was fired, Library of Congress fired, a lot of stuff going on here. So where does that lead in our future? So we're going to have to wrap up, and I'm going to ask you, Yani, to take it home. What do you want to leave our viewers with as we're wrapping up? What have we not talked about that you wanted to talk about today?
I think actually that last point that you made there was really, really interesting. With all the stuff that's going on, and the like you said, the Library of Congress being, well, pretty much reshaped, and the deletion of history and various different things. The old saying, the one with the gold makes the rules. And I think it's really, really important for people to be able to find a space within a story that gives them the opportunity to learn and find more information about it. And that's one of the things, this is what I'll leave you with, is one of the things that we're doing with this world. I say we because there's a whole team put together now. So with this IP that I've created, we're doing a web app and a film, a feature film, 3 feature film, 3 prequel feature films, and some other spin-off stories. One of the things we're doing is we're going to be creating within that web app a space for people to come together and talk about the stories and so on, like a Discord type situation, or you can think of it more as a creative Discord space where people can come in, create their own characters within the world, retain the rights to their IP, monetize their works, and through the world in the book, because it is the real world that we live in. They'll also be able to find historical facts, within the fictional world. So it's historical fact inside of a fictional world. So it should give it a little bit of a safe space to exist that maybe is or already it has been or is going to be deleted soon, because every time I turn around, there's some new thing that's being deleted, and it makes me want to pull my hair out but I don't have any left, so it's fine.
Yeah. I always look at it as grounding it in reality, right? And so grounding it in this reality, but looking at this future. You have just been so wonderful. I really appreciate what you've done. Like I've told the other readers, take a look. If you do like this book, there's going to be some other amazing authors we've talked to already. We're going to continue to talk about dystopian, apocalyptic, futuristic, speculative, all these kinds of fictions. So, Yani, thank you so much. And we are going to end the episode and go ahead and get to our next author. If you want to reach Yani, there's all kinds of contact information in here. So please reach out to him. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.